They didn't even try to hide it, the look they exchanged when I said I'd like to travel alone. My son Matthew glanced at his wife as if I'd suggested skydiving with a torn parachute. To the Maldives? He repeated, raising one brow. By yourself? I nodded, calmly placing my fork down. Yes, I've always wanted to see them. White sand, turquoise water. I even looked up the weather. Heather, my daughter-in-law, scoffed softly, not even bothering to hide it behind her wineglass. You're 73, Nora. I know how old I am, dear, I said, letting the smile rest politely on my lips. I'd worn that smile for years. At church socials, at Matthew's graduations, when Heather handed me store-bought cranberry sauce each Thanksgiving. It was the smile you wear when you know what will be said next. Mom, Matthew began, tone dropping into that tired place adult children speak from when they think they're wiser. We just worry. Long flights aren't easy. You have some heart issues, don't you? And besides, he gestured around the table. You have us. Isn't that enough? He said us like it was a gift. As if I hadn't spent the last 10 years watching their lives roll forward while mine folded neatly into the background. I knew my place. The occasional babysitter, the holiday extra, the woman who cooked, but was no longer asked how she was sleeping at night. I've raised you, I said quietly. I buried my husband. I've spent the last 3 decades living for everyone else. I think I can manage a beach chair. Silence. Then laughter. Heather's first. That thin, brittle kind. Oh, you're serious. I looked at my grandson Jamie across the table. He was 17, scrolling something on his phone, earbuds still tangled around his neck. He didn't look up. I wasn't surprised. Matthew shook his head. Mom, I don't think that's the best idea. You could spend that money fixing up the garden or leaving it to someone. I finished for him. That's what you mean, isn't it? You don't think I should use the money. You think I should save it for after I'm gone. I didn't say that. But you thought it. He didn't deny it. After dinner, I helped clear the dishes. Heather didn't stop me. She never did. I wiped the counter while she talked about her co-worker's new kitchen remodel. She had no idea I was thinking about flights and passports and whether I still had a swimsuit that didn't sag in the back. At home, the house was quiet. I watered the plant by the window, the one that never bloomed, and I sat in the armchair that still smelled faintly of Gerald's cologne. I imagined the Maldives, salt on my skin, the sound of waves, and no one saying should. I pulled out the little notebook where I kept my real accounts, not the ones Matthew knew about. Gerald had set it up years ago, before the first surgery. In case you ever want to go somewhere I can't, he'd said. I never used it. Not until now. I looked at the balance. Enough. Then I opened my laptop, typed in Maldives solo travel packages, and felt something inside me lift. Like a small balloon rising against the weight of years. They said old people shouldn't travel alone. I decided I'd send them a postcard. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was nervous. At least, not in the way people assume. It was something quieter, like the hum of a fridge at night. The stillness after deciding, really deciding, for the first time in years. The next morning, I opened the old cedar chest at the foot of my bed. Inside, a folded beach towel with fading flamingos, a straw sun hat with a broken ribbon, and a zippered pouch that still smelled like sunscreen from a trip Gerald and I had taken to Florida 30 years ago. I ran my fingers along the frayed brim of the hat. Gerald had teased me for wearing it on cloudy days. "The clouds respect your authority," he'd said. I took the hat. Let the ribbon stay broken. By 10, I'd called a local travel agent. Not the online ones. I didn't trust those with something this personal. Her name was Clarissa, and she sounded about my granddaughter's age. She asked how soon I wanted to leave. "As soon as you can get me there," I said. "But I don't want the lonely widow on a tour package." She laughed. Noted, independent, adventurous. "No," I said. "Just tired of waiting." By noon, we'd picked the dates, flights, hotel, overwater bungalow. I told her I'd bring cash for the deposit. She hesitated, maybe surprised, but said okay. I hung up and walked to the drawer with the emergency envelope. I'd added to it every month, even when nobody was looking, especially then. There was satisfaction in peeling off the band of 20s, in counting out something that was only mine. The bank teller didn't blink when I withdrew the rest. Maybe it wasn't so unusual these days, a woman like me taking back her choices. Still, I asked for small bills, just to feel the weight of it. That afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and made a list. To pack, passport, check, travel insurance papers, swimsuit, buy new one, sunblock, at least SPF 50, good book, not about grief. Gerald's ring, for my necklace. The ring sat in the sugar bowl. That's where I kept it. I wasn't sentimental. Not in the way my daughter-in-law pretended to be with her Pinterest boards. But I liked knowing it was near the coffee. I slipped it onto a thin silver chain and fastened it around my neck. Then I opened my closet. The clothes told a story I wasn't proud of. Cotton pants, sensible shoes, blouses that said, "I'm still useful." I found one summer dress I hadn't worn in years. Soft blue, cap sleeves. It didn't zip all the way, but it would. Later, I walked to the pharmacy to buy a new swimsuit. The young girl behind the counter didn't say a word, didn't ask if it was a gift. I appreciated that more than she'll ever know. At home, I made tea and sat by the window. The neighborhood kids were riding bikes. Someone had left their sprinklers on, and I watched the arcs of water glitter in the sun. Heather called around 5. "We were talking," she said. "Maybe we could plan a little trip together sometime. You, me, the kids." "Where to?" She hesitated. "Branson? Or a riverboat cruise? Something calmer. Safer." Safer. I thanked her. I didn't mention that my tickets were booked, or that I'd bought a swimsuit with a plunging neckline. "Let us know before you do anything drastic, okay?" she added. I smiled. "Of course, dear." That night, I folded each item carefully into my suitcase. Not the big one, just a medium roller. One that said, "I'm not running away. I'm traveling light." When I zipped it shut, something clicked inside me, like a door that had been stuck for years. I left the ticket printouts on the dresser. I knew exactly what I was doing. And this time, I wasn't asking anyone's permission. At the airport, I almost turned around. Not because I was afraid, not in the trembling, helpless way people imagine women my age to be, but because the first thing I saw after check-in was a young couple arguing in line. The woman was crying over a missed connection. The man yelled at the gate agent. People stared, shuffled their bags, checked their watches, and I thought, what am I doing here? I stood quietly, clutching my passport like it might fly away if I loosened my grip. A TSA officer motioned me forward. I nodded, polite. Always polite. Gerald used to joke that I could get through customs in North Korea just by smiling. The officer asked me to take off my shoes. I bent slowly. No one offered to help. I liked that. I didn't want help, just space. Security was a blur of trays and beeping machines. I held onto my carry-on like a child holds a toy. For comfort, not need. At the gate, I found a seat near the windows. Outside, the tarmac shimmered in the heat. Planes moved like giant beasts, slow, inevitable. My flight didn't leave for another hour. I took out a book, but the words blurred. Instead, I watched the people around me. A girl in leggings with a coffee bigger than her purse. A man talking too loudly into his headset. An elderly couple, older than me, sharing a bag of pretzels. She fed him one at a time. I looked away. Not because I was lonely, because I remembered what it felt like to be part of a we. The boarding call came sooner than expected. I stood up, rolled my suitcase forward, and handed over my ticket. "Enjoy your flight, ma'am," the attendant said. Ma'am. I wanted to say, I'm not fragile, but then maybe I was, just not in the way she thought. Inside the plane, I found my seat, 27A by the window. The man next to me was already asleep, mouth open. I didn't mind. He smelled like aftershave and hard candy. Not unpleasant. I looked out as the plane began to taxi. The wheels bumped. The cabin dimmed. And then, the lift. That moment when the ground lets go and the sky accepts you. I hadn't flown since Gerald and I went to Arizona 15 years ago. Back then, we held hands during takeoff. I reached for his hand again, instinct, memory, but found only my armrest. I didn't cry. Instead, I whispered, "We're flying, Jerry, just like you promised." The flight was long. 10 hours to Doha, then another stretch to Malay. The meals were forgettable. The turbulence was not. But I breathed through it, counting to 10, the way Gerald used to when I panicked about thunder. At the layover, I found a small cafe and bought a sandwich I didn't finish. The airport smelled like spices and metal. I sat near a woman in a hijab, her baby sleeping in a sling. She smiled at me. I smiled back. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The final flight was short. A puddle jumper over water so blue it looked fake. I couldn't stop staring. The other passengers were mostly couples, honeymooners, a few influencers filming every breath they took. One of them asked if I wanted help lifting my bag. "No, thank you," I said. "I carried it this far." They blinked. I smiled. At the Malay airport, a man from the resort held a sign with my name. "Mrs. Winslow?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Just me." He didn't flinch, just took my bag and led me to the speedboat. And then, the ocean. Real and endless and so stunning it hurt my eyes. I sat at the front, wind in my hair, salt on my lips, and thought, so this is what freedom feels like. No one knew where I was. No one had called. And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel guilty about that. The bungalow was everything I had hoped for, and more than I knew to hope for. Polished wood floors, white linen sheets, a deck that opened directly onto water so clear I could see fish gliding like silver threads beneath the surface. There was a welcome drink on the table, something with mint and lime, and a small handwritten note. "Welcome, Mrs. Winslow. We're honored to have you." I stood there for a long time, suitcase still closed, shoes still on, just looking. No one needed me here. No one expected anything. And I didn't know what to do with that. The first night, I stayed in. I didn't unpack, not really. I hung 2 dresses, folded some underwear into the drawer, placed Gerald's ring on the nightstand next to the little ceramic lamp. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't scroll the news on my phone. I just lay on the bed, the fan circling above like a slow breath, and listened. The sea has a voice, not a roar like back home on the East Coast. No, here it whispered. Constant, insistent, like a thought you can't shake. It said, "You made it." And I whispered back, "I don't know who I am here." The next morning, I tried to act like a traveler. I put on the dress with the palm leaves, the one I almost didn't bring, and walked barefoot to breakfast. The sun was already high, the sky so sharp and blue it made my head hurt. I sat alone at a table set for two. The waiter offered me coffee. I asked for strong. Around me, couples murmured in languages I didn't recognize. There was laughter, camera clicks, the occasional clink of a champagne glass. No one looked at me. Not in judgment, not in curiosity. I was invisible, but not erased. Just allowed. Halfway through my toast, someone sat down at the table next to mine. She was around my age, maybe a few years older. Tall, elegant in that way French women always seem to be. Effortless, disheveled, perfectly exact. She wore linen pants and a red scarf around her neck, though it was already 28 degrees. She caught my eye and smiled. "Americana?" "Yes," I said, surprised. She nodded toward my plate. "They make terrible croissants here, but the mango is good." I laughed before I meant to. That's honest. "I'm too old to lie about food." She reached for a piece of papaya. "I'm Helene. Nora." She didn't offer a handshake. I liked that. We just kept eating. Two women in silence, not trying too hard. After breakfast, we walked slowly toward the beach together. Not planned, just in sync. "First time?" she asked. "Yes." "You came alone?" "I did." She looked at me, truly looked, and said, "Brave." "Or foolish," I offered. "No, brave. To be alone and not apologize for it, very brave." We found two lounge chairs under a palm tree and sat, facing the sea. She lit a cigarette. I didn't protest. She exhaled. "My husband used to say women disappear after 60. I said, good, let them. We can do more damage that way." I smiled. "Mine used to say that most men didn't deserve their wives. He died before I could agree out loud." She glanced at me. "How long?" 11 years, she nodded. 12 for me. We didn't say more after that. Not for a while. But as the waves rolled in, as the breeze pulled at our scarves and hair, I felt something shift. Not joy, not yet, but something like beginning. And for the first time on that island, I didn't feel alone. I felt seen. By the third morning, I no longer hesitated at the breakfast buffet. I didn't scan the room to see where I should sit or what others might think. I took the table by the window, the one with the best view of the shoreline. I reached for the mango first, just like Helene had said. She joined me a few minutes later, as if we'd planned it, though we never had. "I like your earrings," she said, pouring herself coffee. "Thank you. They were a gift. From myself." She smiled. "Best kind." We ate mostly in silence. That was how our companionship worked. No effort, no pressure. The quiet between us wasn't awkward. It was agreed upon. After breakfast, we walked along the shore. The sand was hot already, soft as flour. I let it press between my toes, anchoring me in a way nothing back home had in years. "You told your family where you are?" she asked. "No." She nodded, unsurprised. "Mine knows. My daughter cried. She thinks I'm losing my mind." "Are you?" "Of course." She grinned. "That's why I came." We sat under a palm tree, watching a group of newlyweds pose with matching hats and plastic champagne glasses. They laughed too loudly, touched each other too carefully. Helene leaned over. "Do you regret it? Coming here?" She shook her head. "Waiting so long." I thought for a moment. "I regret thinking I needed someone to come with me." she sighed. We. That's the trap. We watched the sea for a while, not talking. Then, without warning, I said, "My son told me not to go. Said it wasn't appropriate." Helene didn't react. She just plucked a shell from the sand and rubbed it between her fingers. "I think I was supposed to leave the money to my grandchildren. That's the unspoken rule. You get old, you get quiet, and you leave the house paid off and the good china wrapped in paper." "And what do you get?" she asked. I shrugged. "A recliner." Helene threw the shell into the water. "No, thank you." That afternoon, we booked a spa appointment together. She insisted. "You cannot come to the Maldives and smell like airport air," she said. "It is a crime." We lay side by side in a white room with sea salt scrubs and soft hands pressing old tension out of our backs. I nearly cried from the tenderness of it, not the treatment, the fact that someone touched me without asking for anything in return. Afterward, I looked in the mirror and saw my face flushed, soft, almost bright. Helene stood beside me adjusting her scarf. "You look younger." "I feel awake." We walked back in the twilight. The air smelled like fruit and salt. I asked her if she'd always been this fearless. "Not always," she said. "But after 65, I decided I would stop asking for permission. My husband died, and the world forgot about me. I decided to remind it." At the door to my bungalow, we paused. "Tomorrow," she said, "you come with me on the reef boat. We will see fish. You will scream a little. Then you will feel alive." "I don't know if I—" "Too late," she said, waving her hand. "You already said yes." Inside, I lay on the bed without turning on the lights. Outside, the sea breathed in and out. I didn't feel lost. I felt claimed. That night, I wrote a letter I never meant to send. The resort provided stationery. Cream-colored paper with a faint watermark of palm leaves. I sat at the small desk facing the lagoon, the sound of the tide tapping at the stilts beneath my bungalow. I wrote "Dear Matthew" and stopped. It looked wrong, too formal, too distant. So I crossed it out and wrote, "My son." Then I sat there, pen in hand, not knowing where to begin. Maybe with "I forgive you." But that wasn't true. Not yet. Maybe with "You hurt me." But that sounded like accusation, and I was tired of that tone. So I began simply. "You once told me that old people shouldn't travel alone, that the world isn't safe anymore. You said it like a warning, but I think it was a command. Stay still, stay quiet, stay useful." The ink bled a little as I wrote. I hadn't used a real pen in months. Bills and birthdays had turned everything into texts and screens. I kept writing. "I want you to know that I'm safe. Safer than I've felt in years. Nobody here calls me mom or grandma. Nobody tells me to rest. I eat when I want. Sleep when I want. I swim. I laugh. I don't apologize for either." I paused. The sea was glowing faintly, lit from beneath by the moon. Fish darted through the water like streaks of silver lightning. I remembered how Matthew, as a boy, used to run barefoot through the yard after summer rain, chasing fireflies with a jar. I wondered when he'd stopped seeing wonder as something worth chasing. "You think you protected me by keeping me close. But really, you just made me small. You did it out of love, I know that. But love can shrink a person if it's built from fear." I hesitated, then wrote one more line. "I hope someday you love me enough to let me be free." I folded the letter, slid it into the drawer, and left it there. It wasn't meant for the post. Maybe it was meant for me. Proof that I could still say what I meant, even if nobody ever read it. In the morning, Helene knocked on my door, bright as the sun itself. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and carried 2 towels. Ready? For what? The reef, Madame Winslow. We are going to see the world beneath the world. We took the small resort boat out past the shallows. The ocean deepened from turquoise to sapphire. When we stopped, the guide handed out masks and fins. I hesitated, feeling ridiculous in the rubber gear. Helene adjusted hers without shame. "Don't think," she said. "Just breathe." The first shock of water stole my breath. It was cold and immense and full of sound, the crackle of coral, the muffled hum of the waves. Then I saw them. Schools of fish flashing like living ribbons, a sea turtle gliding as if time didn't exist. I forgot my age, my fears, everything. When I surfaced, gasping, the sky looked enormous. Helene floated beside me, her hair slicked back, laughing like a child. "You did it!" "I did," I said. And for a moment I wanted to cry, because I couldn't remember the last time I had done something just because I wanted to. On the ride back, Helene dozed under her hat. I watched the horizon blur into gold and thought of that unsent letter in my drawer. Maybe one day Matthew would read it. Maybe not. Either way, it had already done its work. It had reminded me that my life still belonged to me. I lost my wallet on a Tuesday. It happened sometime between breakfast and the walk back to my bungalow, somewhere along the boardwalk, or maybe by the little souvenir stand where I'd pause to admire a bracelet made of blue glass beads. I didn't buy it. I'd smiled at the girl behind the counter, touched the beads, and kept walking. I remember that clearly. What I don't remember is what I did with my bag afterward. I didn't realize it was gone until I was back in my room, reaching for it to grab a tip for the housekeeping envelope. The zipper pocket was open, empty. At first, I told myself it was somewhere in the room, under the bed, behind the chair, inside my suitcase. I tore through everything twice. My hands started to shake. My mouth went dry. Not because of the money. The cards, the cash, they could be replaced. But my ID was in there. My hotel key card. The little note with my flight details scribbled in my own handwriting. My name. My direction. Gone. I sat down on the edge of the bed, pressing both palms to my thighs, willing my body to stop trembling. I hadn't felt this fragile in years, not even after Gerald died. Then, at least, there had been casseroles and hand-holding and people who knew what to say. Here, there was only me, and the sound of the sea, indifferent. I went to the front desk. The young man there was named Asif. His name tag was slightly crooked, and he looked barely old enough to rent a car. "I lost my wallet," I said. He blinked. "Oh. When did you see it last?" "If I knew that," I said gently, "I wouldn't be here." He flushed. "Right. Of course. Let me check with Lost and Found." He disappeared behind a door. Helene appeared beside me, as if summoned by the gods of timing and old friendship. "Something wrong?" I hesitated. Saying it out loud felt like failure, like admitting I wasn't capable, that I shouldn't have come here alone after all. "I lost my wallet," I said. She nodded once, no surprise in her face. "Well, that happens." "That happens?" "Oui. It happened to me in Rome, and in Bangkok. I once left a purse in a taxi in Madrid. It is the price we pay for moving through the world with wonder. It was foolish. It was human." Asif returned. "Not turned in yet. But we'll search the grounds. In the meantime, we can replace your room key and flag your account." "You'll be fine, Mrs. Winslow." "Thank you." He smiled. "Don't worry. It's happened before." I went back to the bungalow and sat on the porch. Helene brought tea without asking. We drank in silence for a while. "You know," she said finally, "I'm proud of you. For losing my wallet? For asking for help." That stopped me. I hadn't realized how rare that had become. Back home, I never asked. Not when I needed rides, not when the faucet leaked, not even when I felt lonely. I just waited for someone to notice. No one did. Here, I had no choice. And maybe that was the point. The next morning, Asif called. A staff member had found my wallet in a planter near the souvenir stand. Everything intact. I thanked him. Thanked the girl at the counter. Thanked the universe. Later, I walked by the bracelet again. This time, I bought it. Not because I needed it, but because it reminded me of that moment when I'd felt scared and small and then not. It wasn't about the wallet. It was about learning I could still lose something and not fall apart. The first time I saw the sign-up sheet for diving lessons, I walked right past it. It was pinned near the spa entrance, a plain clipboard with blocky black letters. Beginner Dive Reef Lagoon, Wednesday, 10th a.m. Below that, 5 names already scribbled in bubbly, confident handwriting. Young names, backpacker names, names with hyphens and heart dots over the eyes. I kept walking. I was there for a massage, not adventure. My knees weren't what they used to be, and I'd never learned to swim properly, just enough to dog paddle at the lake with Gerald when we were courting. Diving was for people with GoPros and abs. But that evening, after dinner, I sat with Helene on the beach and told her about it. Casually, like someone mentioning they once dreamed of being an actress. "You didn't sign up?" she asked, horrified. "Of course not. I'm 73. And? And I don't do things like that." She gave me a look, the kind you reserve for stubborn children and hopeless politicians. "Nora, you crossed an ocean to get here. You left behind people who tried to clip your wings, and now you are afraid of a little air tank? It's not the air tank. It's the everything." She snorted. "Then you must go, especially because it scares you." That was her logic. Backward. Brave. I laughed. "You sound like Gerald." Then he must have been right often. The next morning, before I could talk myself out of it, I went back to the spa entrance. The list was still there. 2 more names had been added. I signed mine at the bottom. Nora Winslow. A little shaky. A little proud. By 9:45, I was standing in a wetsuit that clung to all the places I wished it wouldn't. The instructor, a patient Sri Lankan woman named Rani, fitted me with gear. I tried not to focus on the tightness in my chest or the fact that I looked like a seal trying to stand upright. "You okay, Mrs. Winslow?" she asked gently. "I'm here," I said. "Let's see what that means." She smiled. We practiced breathing with the regulator first. Just me and Rani in waist-deep water. I panicked the first time I went under, instincts screaming, "You're not supposed to breathe down here." But she stayed close, nodding, gesturing slowly. Inhale, exhale, through the mouth. Slow. After 20 minutes, I stopped flinching. After 30, I was floating. The dive itself was shallow, only 10 feet. We went as a small group, 3 couples and me. The boat rocked gently. They laughed and posed for photos. I stayed near the edge, trying not to look like a grandmother chaperoning prom. When it was my turn to go down, Ronnie gave me a thumbs up. And I jumped. The silence struck first. It wasn't really silent. There were sounds, tiny pops and echoes. But it was otherworldly, like being inside a heartbeat. And then I saw it. Coral in colors I didn't know names for. Fish in shapes that belonged in stories. A stingray gliding beneath us, elegant and ancient. Ronnie held onto my wrist, guiding me slowly. Her eyes behind the mask were calm, kind. At one point I looked up. The surface was just a shimmer above. Light rippled through the water like soft curtains. I was in a cathedral of color and movement, and I was not afraid. When we surfaced, I pulled off my mask and laughed. Salt water on my tongue, hair plastered back, every muscle shaking. But not from fear, from joy. "You did amazing," Ronnie said. "I did it," I whispered. Back on land, I sat on the dock with a towel around my shoulders. The couples left quickly, eager to post their photos. I stayed, watched the water. Remembered how small I'd felt a week ago. Now I felt small in a different way. Not invisible, just part of something bigger. Later that evening, Helene met me at dinner. She took one look at my face and clapped her hands. "I knew it," she said. "You have reef eyes." Reef eyes? The look people get when they've been somewhere deeper than they thought they could go. I touched my necklace, where Gerald's ring rested just above my collarbone. He would have been proud. I knew that. Not because I was brave, but because I'd finally remembered how to breathe. The girl at the bar couldn't have been more than 23, maybe 25 if I gave her the benefit of doubt. She wore her hair in a bun that kept coming loose, and her uniform polo was a size too big. Her name tag read Mina. I'd come in for a late tea. The restaurant was already setting up for dinner. White tablecloths, soft music humming like a memory. I sat at the edge of the patio, half in shadow, watching the sun lower itself into the water like a coin into a wishing well. Mina approached with a warm smile. "Chamomile, right?" I blinked. "You remember? You always ask for it, with honey and no lemon." She brought the cup with both hands, gently, like it was precious. "Most people stop seeing you after 70. Mina didn't. That already made her special." She lingered after placing the cup down. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. "Are you here alone?" I smiled. "I am." Her eyes widened slightly, then she bit her lip. "Sorry, I don't mean to be rude. It's just rare." "It is," I said simply, "but not wrong." "No," she said quickly. "No, not wrong, just different." She was trying to find the right words. I let her. I remembered being that age, too unsure of my own voice to risk saying the wrong thing. "I think it's amazing," she said finally. "I don't know anyone who would do that. Especially not—" She stopped herself, embarrassed. "I mean, not older people. Sorry." I laughed. "It's all right, Mina. You're not the first to be surprised. I just think it's brave and kind of beautiful." I stirred my tea, watching the honey disappear. It didn't feel brave. It felt like the only way to breathe. She tilted her head. "Did they try to stop you?" "They didn't think I should come," I said. "That I should stay home, be safe, be quiet, be useful." Mina nodded slowly. "My grandmother's the same. She raised me. And now she just exists in the same house. Doesn't go anywhere. My mom says she's too fragile, but she used to be fierce. I miss that version of her." "She's still in there," I said. "Sometimes she just needs permission." Mina smiled faintly. "Maybe." She lingered for a moment longer, then said, "Do you want dinner here tonight or room service?" "Here," I said. "I want to watch the sea fall asleep." She laughed. That's a pretty way to put it. After she left, I sat alone with my tea and my thoughts. The sky deepened into shades of orange and indigo. Somewhere across the patio, a couple toasted their anniversary. Waiters moved like dancers, quiet and deliberate. And I felt not just content, but present. Later, as I was leaving, Mina slipped something into my hand, a small piece of paper, folded twice. I waited until I got back to my bungalow to open it. I hope I grow up like you someday. Not afraid to take my own trip. Thank you for showing me it's possible. Mina. I read it twice, then tucked it into my book, between the pages I'd stopped pretending to read. She had no idea what that note meant to me. For years, I thought I had to be needed to be valuable, to be a mother, a helper, a wallet, a listener. But here I was, thousands of miles from my family, and I had offered something just by existing. Not by giving, not by sacrificing, just by being seen. And maybe that was enough. I found the message from Matthew the morning after the storm. The rain had come down hard all night. Not dangerous, just insistent. Like the island needed to remember it was still part of the world. I had fallen asleep to the sound of it drumming the roof, waking once around 3 a.m. to close the curtains as wind swept in a breath of cool, salt air. When I finally stirred, the sea outside was glass again, the storm already forgotten. I brewed tea, wrapped myself in the shawl I always traveled with, and opened my phone for the first time in days. It was waiting. Hi, Mom. We've been trying to reach you. Jamie said you might have gone somewhere, but you didn't tell us. Can you let us know where you are? Are you okay? It was sent 2 days ago. Another followed, later that night. I just want to make sure you're safe. Heather's worried. Please call when you get this. I sat with the phone in my lap, blinking at the screen. A strange mixture of something warm and something bitter bloomed in my chest. They noticed. Eventually. I didn't answer right away. Not out of spite, but because I didn't know what I wanted to say. The words hovered behind my ribs like birds waiting for permission to fly. Are you safe? Yes. Safer than I've been in years. Are you okay? I'm more than okay. I'm becoming. But I knew none of that would make sense to him. Instead, I set the phone aside and opened the sliding doors to the veranda. The sea stretched out like a painting, calm, brilliant, endless. The storm had passed and left everything clean. Later at breakfast, Helene eyed me over her coffee. You look like someone who's read a letter they didn't expect. I slid the phone across the table. She read silently, then handed it back. You will answer? Not yet. She nodded, unfazed. They will survive the waiting. We spent the day walking, no agenda, just two women with hats and sandals, letting the island show itself one step at a time. We found a cove no one else seemed to know about, sat on a rock while little crabs scrambled at our feet. She told me about the years after her husband died. The silence, the odd relief, the guilt that followed. We had a good marriage, she said, but after he passed, I realized how much space I had given up to keep things smooth. I looked at her. And now? Now I live in my own outline, she said. Finally. That night, back in my bungalow, I sat down again with my phone. I typed slowly. I'm safe, Matthew. I'm somewhere beautiful. Somewhere I chose for myself. You don't have to worry, not because I need protection, but because I'm not lost. I hovered over the send button, then deleted it. Instead, I took out the resort stationery again. I hope this trip teaches you something. Not just about me, but about what it means to trust that the people you love can choose what's best for themselves. I didn't leave you behind. I walked toward myself. And I'm still walking. I folded the note and placed it next to the one I'd written earlier in the week. Unsent, but written. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes saying something, even to yourself, is the beginning of becoming someone new. I chose the table closest to the water, even though the staff warned me the breeze might be stronger there. That's the point, I said. Let it blow. The table was set for one. White napkin, polished silver, a small candle flickering against the soft wind. Behind me, other guests clinked glasses, laughed, posed for photos against the twilight. I didn't feel out of place. I felt exactly where I was supposed to be. The waiter, a quiet, kind-eyed man named Thomas, brought over the menu and a smile. "Anything special tonight, Mrs. Winslow?" "Surprise me." He nodded approvingly. "I like that." The sun was just beginning to sink into the ocean. The sky went through its parade of colors: soft rose, bruised violet, then that last brush of gold that makes everything look like a memory. I was sipping my wine when I noticed the man at the next table. Older, alone, white shirt, sleeves rolled. He wore a simple silver wedding band that caught the light when he reached for his glass. His face was sun-lined, his hair almost entirely gray, and he had the stillness of someone who'd waited through many things. We didn't speak at first. Just a nod, a polite acknowledgement. I returned it and turned back to the sea. But after a while, he leaned slightly toward me and said, "It's something, isn't it? The way the sun gives the water back." I smiled. "I suppose it's teaching us how to do the same." He chuckled. "That's more poetic than I expected to hear tonight." "Old women are full of surprises." He raised his glass. "As are old men." His name was Peter, from Devon originally, though he lived in New Zealand now. He'd come to the Maldives with his wife 3 years ago, their last big trip before she passed. "Pancreatic," he said simply. "Quick," which is a strange thing to be grateful for. I understand. We didn't dig into grief. It was just there, like a third person at the table. Not unwelcome, not dramatic. Just part of the conversation, even when it wasn't spoken. He told me about the book he was reading. I told him about Hélène and her terrible French jokes. We shared stories like postcards. Short, sincere, stamped with truth. "Do your children know where you are?" he asked gently. I nodded. Now they do. "And?" "They're not used to the idea of me choosing things." He looked at me. "And you?" "I'm learning not to ask permission." Peter smiled. "Took me until 70 to learn that. After all those years being reliable, predictable. What changed?" My wife looked me in the eye one day and said, "Peter, if you don't start saying what you want, one day you'll forget how." I looked down at my hands. I think I already had. The food came, fresh, fragrant. We ate slowly, letting the silence stretch between stories. Before dessert, he asked, "Do you mind if I join you? I hate eating alone." "You're not," I said, gesturing to the space between us. "You just didn't realize we were already at the same table." He moved over. We shared the chocolate mousse. There was no flirtation, no pretense, just the comfort of being seen without obligation. I hadn't felt that in years. When the evening wound down, he stood and offered me a hand. "I'm going to walk the beach. Would you like to come?" "No," I said, not unkindly. "Tonight, I'd like to sit with what I've already gathered." He understood. We didn't exchange numbers, didn't promise to see each other again, and that was fine. Some people are meant to show up for a moment, and hold a little space beside you, not to fill it, just to remind you it's yours. I sat long after he left, watching the candle flicker low. The sea kept breathing. The stars came out, shy and perfect. And I whispered to the dark, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular, just to the night itself, for letting me remember how to be still and how to be whole. The bracelet came in a small velvet pouch left on the wooden bench outside my bungalow door. At first, I thought it might have been a mistake, a guest's souvenir delivered to the wrong room. But then I saw the note, written in Helene's unmistakable cursive, sharp and elegant like her voice. For the next chapter, you'll know when to wear it. H. Inside the pouch was a bracelet made of sea glass beads, the same milky blue as the ocean at sunrise. Not perfect beads, each one shaped a little differently, like softened edges of old pain. The clasp was silver, understated. Sure. I held it in my palm for a long time before fastening it around my wrist. She was gone. I found out at breakfast. The hostess told me Hélène had checked out that morning, taken the early boat to the airport. No fanfare, no goodbyes, just a quiet exit, as if she'd never been there. But she had. Oh, she had. I felt her absence like a missing beat in a favorite song. That afternoon, I sat on the porch and watched the horizon without moving. Not sad, not exactly. Just heavier. The way you feel when you realize someone gave you something you didn't know you needed, and now you have to carry it forward. The bracelet warmed against my skin. A staff member came by later with a folded message, a note Hélène had left at the front desk. "Nora, I think we only get so many awakenings in one life. The rest of the time we just manage. But this place, this time, was one of mine. Because I met you. You reminded me of something I was starting to forget. That women our age are not past anything. We are just arriving. I am going back to a life I've chosen. A small apartment, a cat that ignores me, some dear friends, and a balcony with wind. Come visit. Or don't, but leave. Je t'embrasse. Hélène." I read it 3 times, folded it, pressed it to my chest, and then I cried. Not for the loss, but for the wonder of it. For the gift of having known someone who saw me fully, quickly, without agenda. Later that night, I sat down and wrote 2 postcards. One to Hélène. No address, just Marseille, and the hope that her post office knew the rest. I wrote only, "The bracelet fits perfectly. Thank you for reminding me I still have places to be." The second was for myself. Yes, for myself. I addressed it to my home back in Vermont, to my quiet mailbox beneath the pine tree. I wrote, "Dear Nora, you did it. You said yes to yourself, and no one died. The world didn't collapse. In fact, it opened. Remember this next time fear comes whispering. Remember this when you forget who you are. You are not late. You are not too much. You are becoming." I left the card with the concierge. I wanted it to greet me when I returned, like a lighthouse in case I ever lost sight of the shore again. That night, I wore the bracelet to dinner. No one noticed. No one needed to. But I noticed. And that was enough. It clinked softly against the stem of my wine glass, and with every delicate sound, I heard her voice, dry, amused, unshaken, saying, "See? Told you. Still arriving." I wrote the postcards the morning I left. Not out of duty, but with intention, carefully, deliberately, the way one arranges flowers they grew themselves. I sat on the veranda with a pot of tea, barefoot, legs curled under me like I used to sit before arthritis asked me to reconsider. The sky was pale. The island was quiet. Even the sea seemed to be holding its breath. I chose 5 postcards, one for each person who thought they knew me. The first was to Matthew. You once said, "Old people shouldn't travel alone." I thought of that while floating over a coral reef, watching fish more colorful than any holiday you've ever planned. I'm not angry. I just wanted you to know. I went anyway. And it was worth it. No venom. No guilt. Just truth. The second was for Heather. You were right about one thing. I do need support. But not the kind you were offering. I needed space. And silence. And freedom to remember who I was before I became a calendar footnote in someone else's life. I found it here. I hope you find yours someday, too. The third was for Jamie, my grandson. The ocean is as big as they say, and much quieter. I thought of you while watching the sunset. The way you used to chase light in the backyard. Barefoot and fearless. I hope you never stop chasing, even when they tell you to sit down. The fourth was to myself. The older self. The future self. The one who might forget again. If you're reading this at the kitchen table, wondering what comes next, remember this. You already did the thing they said you couldn't do. You left. You lived. You returned whole. And the last was addressed to no one in particular. They said old people shouldn't travel alone. I sent them a postcard. I dropped them at the front desk with the same calm I once had when leaving casseroles at funerals. Quiet, steady, knowing they'd land where they needed to. On the way to the boat, I took one last look at the bungalow. It was just a room, 4 walls, a bed, a deck with sand between the planks. But it had held something sacred, the moment a woman stopped waiting for permission. The resort staff waved as I boarded. Mina was among them, smiling through misty eyes. She pressed a shell into my hand, smooth, pink, small enough to carry. "For your next trip," she whispered. The boat pulled away from the dock, and the island began to shrink, the water widening between us. I didn't feel like I was leaving. I felt like I was carrying it all with me. The bracelet, the letters, the reef, the silence. Helene's laugh, Peter's toast, Mina's note, my breath in the water, my name written in my own hand. And above all, the knowing that I had not disappeared with age, that I had not been erased, that I had simply been paused. And now, I was in motion again. When the taxi turned onto my street, I half expected something to be different. But the maple tree still stood in its crooked glory near the mailbox. The neighbors' plastic flamingos were still faded and leaning left. And the sidewalk still cracked the same way near the 3rd step, like a reminder that nothing ever gets fixed unless someone decides it matters. I had been gone nearly 4 weeks. To everyone else, that would seem like a long vacation. To me, it had been a quiet rebellion, a quiet returning. The driver helped with my suitcase. I thanked him, tipping more than necessary just because I could. The porch creaked beneath me. Familiar, worn, mine. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house smelled faintly of dust and lavender. Still. The scent of a life paused. I left my shoes by the door, ran a hand along the hallway as I passed through it, touching the walls like I might miss them otherwise. Nothing had moved. Everything had. I walked into the kitchen and saw the note I'd taped to the fridge before I left. Just in case. Gone away for a while? Don't worry. I hadn't specified where. I hadn't needed to. that wasn't the kind of note you leave for someone else. It was for me. I took it down, folded it neatly, slid it into the drawer with the spare keys and rubber bands that had long lost their stretch. The kettle still worked. I made tea. Same mug, same chair. But I was not the same. My body knew it. The way I stood now, straighter. The way I took up space without apology. The way I let silence fill the room, not rush to cover it. That night, I unpacked slowly. I hung the blue dress, the one I wore the night Hélène gave me the bracelet. I placed the sea glass beads on the nightstand. I didn't need to wear them to remember anymore. I just needed to see them. I opened the book I'd been pretending to read for months and tucked Mina's note into the middle. A marker for the moment someone younger saw something brave in me. Not as nostalgia, but as a future they could want. The next morning, I walked to the mailbox in my slippers and found the postcard I'd sent myself. I stood there on the porch, reading my own handwriting in the soft morning light. You already did the thing they said you couldn't do. You left. You lived. You returned whole. I laughed. Out loud. The sound surprised me. Round and real. I tucked the postcard onto the fridge under a magnet shaped like a pear. Let it be seen. Let it live where the milk list and dentist reminder once ruled. That afternoon, I cleaned the kitchen. Not because it was messy. Because I wanted to mark the beginning of something new. The way people do when spring comes after a long winter. I threw out the half-eaten box of crackers no one ever liked. I tossed the expired vitamins, the 4 emergencies frozen meals. I made room on the shelf. Then I sat by the window and wrote a list. Not a to-do list, not groceries. A list of places I might want to see next. Morocco, Nova Scotia, Japan during cherry blossom season, the coast of Ireland, Marseille. I paused at that last one, smiled. The pen trembled slightly in my fingers, not from fear, from anticipation. By evening, I was tired, but it was a good tired. The kind that comes not from surviving a day, but from stepping fully into it. I made a small dinner. I lit a candle. I poured myself a glass of wine and raised it toward the empty seat across the table. To her, I whispered. The woman I almost didn't become. And I drank. Not because I was lonely, but because I was home. It wasn't dramatic, how the change settled in. No grand declarations, no sudden epiphanies. Just a quiet unfolding. I noticed it first at the grocery store, of all places. A woman in line ahead of me was fumbling with her card, apologizing to the cashier, cheeks flushed. Behind her, a man sighed loud enough to be cruel. I looked at her, really looked, and said, "Take your time." She glanced back at me, startled, then grateful. I wouldn't have said that before. I would have thought it maybe, but I would have stayed quiet, worried it wasn't my place. Now I knew better. Kindness is never wasted breath. The next moment came in the dressing room of a small consignment shop downtown. I'd gone in to drop off a few old sweaters, too many cardigans for a life I no longer planned to spend sitting still. I saw it there, a red coat. Not practical, not discounted, not age-appropriate. I tried it on anyway. The mirror didn't show a young woman trying to be seen. It showed an older woman who already was, not because of the coat, but because she'd stopped waiting for permission to wear red. I wore it out of the store. Cashier smiled like I'd made her day. Maybe I had. But what mattered most was this. I'd made my own. A few days later, Jamie came by. Unexpected. No Heather, no Matthew, just him in a sweatshirt. and that awkwardness boys wear when they want to ask something, but aren't sure they have the right. He sat at the kitchen table, fingers tapping the side of his water glass. "Gran," he said, "where did you go?" I looked at him for a long moment. He was taller now, still half boy, but something in his eyes was changing. A quiet search. "I went where people stopped saying no before I even opened my mouth," I said gently. "Where I could hear myself think. Where I remembered that I'm not done yet." He nodded slowly. Dad was mad. "I know. But," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "I think it's kind of cool that you just went." I smiled. "It wasn't just cool, Jamie. It was necessary." He was quiet for a beat, then asked, "Do you think I'll ever do something like that?" I reached across the table, laid my hand on his. "I hope you don't wait as long as I did." He stayed for tea, didn't check his phone once. When he left, he hugged me harder than usual. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders and the bracelet warm against my skin. A light breeze rustled the trees. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked, and wind chimes answered. And I thought, this is what peace sounds like. Not the absence of noise, but the absence of asking who you're supposed to be in order to deserve rest. I hadn't become someone else. I'd just come home to the version of me that had been waiting for courage, waiting for space, waiting to be invited back into her own life. I had given her the invitation, and she had said yes. So now, if you're reading this, maybe while sitting alone with your own tea, or in a house too quiet, or after another day spent feeling invisible, I want you to hear me. You are not too old. You are not too late. You are not done. Take the trip. Wear the coat. Write the postcard. Say the thing. Light the candle. Leave the room when it no longer fits. No one is coming to unlock the door but you. But you have the key. You always have. If this story found you at the right time, let it be your sign. And if it moved something in you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded. You are still arriving. We all are.